Great. I'd like to introduce Deirdre, our president and CEO. Deirdre, if you'd like to introduce yourself and say hello.
Hi, thanks, JR. Hi, everybody. I'm Deirdre Sullivan, pronouns she, her, and just thrilled to see all of you with us today. I'm, as JR said, the president and CEO of United Way of Larimer County, and know so many of you on this screen from my past work in our wonderful community. We're just thrilled, honored, and excited to have you joining us today in our own learning journey at United Way. We are embarking on a new level of understanding and awareness, and really committed to making sure that we maximize our opportunity to do this as an entire community. So just appreciate all of you taking the time on a Friday afternoon and being here. I'm thrilled to hand the rest of the time over to Patrice Palmer, who I can't quite do cartwheels in a Zoom screen, but if I could, I would, to having Patrice here as our learning guide today. So I will be really brief because Patrice's list of qualifications are much longer than I have time, and I think Patrice would probably prefer to use the time for the learning. So as a humble, awesome human. But Patrice is the principal consultant and CEO of eRoot Consulting, wears a lot of different hats in our community, and we're honored to have you here, Patrice.
Thank you so much. That was actually the best intro that I could have asked for. So thank you so much for that. Thank you all for being here. I recognize some faces, I recognize some names. I appreciate you coming back to be with us again today as we talk about really creating a business case for diversity. Does diversity really pay? And it's hard sometimes to explain that to folks because you're like, obviously, it does. Have you not seen all of the statistics? But today we're going to kind of get down to some of those things so that as you are possibly engaging with your executive leaders, if you're a part of a board and you're trying to really get them to understand why this needs to be important outside of it's just the right thing to do, I hope that I'll give you some tools today that'll allow you to be able to do that in a more sound way and have you feel a little bit more confident as you have this conversation. With that said, we're going to switch right over and jump right in. All right, so can you see my screen? Awesome, I got thumbs up. That means we are cooking with gas. All right, so today we are going to talk about building a business case for diversity. Does diversity really pay? As always, I always like to start with creating a brave space. I always encourage you to do the same. A lot of times, sometimes when we're trying to create a space where everyone can feel included, we don't always think about physical and psychological safety of that person. So because of that, I know I cannot guarantee that all of your salient identities will always feel comfortable, will always feel safe as it relates to your definition of safety. But what I can guarantee you is that this will be a brave space for you, that we will respect your boundaries, that we will be respectful and reflective of the processes learned. I want you to advocate for yourself. I want you to advocate for others. I want you to be able to have things vaulted as needed. So again, what is learned here gets to leave here, and what is said here gets to stay here. And that's because we may have some of our colleagues sharing very personal things about themselves. And so they're doing this with a trust and a understanding that the folks in this space are going to be able to take that information to further their own learning. So I want us to take that into account as we move forward. And last but not least, empower yourself as well as accept others for who they are and where they are on their journey. We do have sometimes when we're on this journey and we're talking about stuff that is as poignant as creating diversity and really creating this understanding of it, sometimes we forget that everyone is not on the same journey as us. Sometimes we forget that some folks are very far along and there are some folks who just got started yesterday. And so we have to meet them where they are, and we need to be able as a group raise them to a higher standard. All right, so take that into account as we begin to talk, as we begin to chat, because I want to make sure that I leave time for us to have conversation, very short amount of time, but I hope that some of these concepts are able to stick with you. All right, as we started last time, we start with discussion because I talk for a living. So I talk too much. So let me just say that. I want to hear from you all. So I'm going to ask some of you to come off mute. I'm going to ask some of you to throw some stuff in the chat. And I want you to take these questions. There's 3 different questions as well as a guiding question that's on here. And what I'm asking you to do for this is to think through, what does a diverse workforce look like? What does it truly look like? Would you describe your space as being diverse? And how are you measuring your diversity? And can that be translated into a dollar amount? So when I ask you, can it be translated to a dollar amount? How much people power is going into ensuring that everyone in the space is up to date and understanding how important this concept is? Are there resources that have been set aside so that folks can actually take part in this? The guiding question that I want you to take with you as we continue to talk through today is, what's the difference between looking diverse and actually being diverse? All right. So I'm going to give folks a minute to digest that. I'm also going to put these questions in the chat. And I'm going to give us a couple of minutes because I want to stay on task and stay on time. But I really want you to think about it. Throw them in the chat. And if you feel comfortable coming off mute, I'll take 1 or 2 folks to come off mute. And let's start talking about that. Now I'll put these in the chat and stop sharing for a sec. All right, those are in the chat. So again, you all can answer those questions to the best of your ability. And also, if you would like to come off mute, I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that so we can talk through it. And you can choose any question. You could either choose the guiding question, or you can choose one of the 3 questions that have been asked.
I'll kick it off. Hey, hello, my name's Morgan.
How you doing?
I am the Family Programs Director at Access International Academy. And so diversity is kind of written into our DNA of our school. We are also a 501c3 nonprofit. And so this is something we think about with essentially every move we make. But when I think about diversity in our workplace, I'll take the second question. We're super diverse just in terms of like nationalities. Like we have teachers from China, teachers from South America, teachers from all over the country, staff, and things like that. And so we're pretty diverse in that respect. But when we dig into it a little bit more, we also like value diversity in mindsets and in backgrounds, and more than just like where you're from, and family backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, and things like that. And so when we're hiring, when we're training our staff, we do try to focus and move towards that awareness and celebrating that and inviting everyone to share that piece of them, and so that our school is more like vibrant in all those multi-levels of diversity. But a part of the reason why I'm here today is seeing if that is on track, or if there's pieces of diversity that we're missing, because it is a very expansive topic and concept, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of the diversity in our workplace, in our school, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Morgan, for coming off mute and bringing that into the space. It has been written into your organizational structure, and it's also very prudent that we still check, we still evaluate, we still assess on a regular basis, because things change. And as long as we know that we're constantly doing that, we can make the necessary flexible changes that are needed. So thank you so much for doing that. One more person before we continue to move on.
I would like to share just a brief idea. I feel that when people think of diversity, they always think of something that is a physical feature, and I kind of disagree with that a little bit. because to me, diversity is maybe in my workplace, I have different generations, based on age, and this new thing with generation Y, X, things like that, that always get mixed up, because we're recognizing the different capacities that each one of those age groups possess. It doesn't necessarily mean to me that I'm going to have people from multiple countries. That it also brings diversity, but I don't think that it should be based merely on just where you're coming from.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that also into the space. A lot of times when folks are looking at diversity, they're trying to count how many identities can I pull into this space instead of actually looking at it, who's missing, what is missing. Because if we take that actually into account, we can bring in things like age. We can bring in things like religion. We can bring in things around immigration status. We can bring in other points of interest. Yes, we want different types of people there, but we don't just want a crayon box. We don't just want to be able to check it off. I want you to walk into this space, whatever space that I am working in, and you know that you are in a diverse space. I shouldn't have to tell you that. That will be seen by the language that you see in around the space. You'll see that in our artwork. You'll see that in the way that we interact with folks, who we're talking to on the phone. All of those things come into play into how we are celebrating diversity and not just trying to check it off. Thank you all so much for those who put things in the chat. Some folks were able just to kind of write it down. And there are going to be some folks, as you're going through this process, you're going to be saying to yourself, okay, how would I have answered that question a little bit differently? So I want this to come with you as you're thinking through this so that you can make the necessary transformational spacing that you actually need. All right, let's get back into the session. If we're going to talk about difference, we cannot negate bias and how our biases come into the space. If you were able to be with me at our first conversation, we talked a lot about this. So I want to briefly talk about this just so that this can be in the back of our heads. Again, when we talk about bias, we're talking about this disproportionate weight that is in favor of or against something or someone. It shows up as either implicit or explicit. Explicit is really pretty easy for us to name because we know it. We know when we see it. We know when someone is intentionally making sure that other people are not in the space. Like we can see that part and we can usually name it. What we can't always name is the unconsciousness of it. If you've ever been in any of my sessions, you know that when we talk about unconscious bias, I name it consciously unaware. You're conscious of it, but you may not be unaware of its impact on other folks. So it still puts us in the driver's seat because there is a conscious act happening that we're just not thinking through critically. All right. So think about how this shows up in, does diversity actually pay? How are we defining diversity? If we only have one pathway of what we think diversity looks like, we will constantly only file for that. I was working with a company and we had an issue where we were doing a situational scenario, and one of the hiring managers, in looking at two candidates who were very different in what they brought to the table, the decision between the two candidates was left to him in what he felt was a diverse understanding. And he said, I'm gonna pick the woman because she's diverse. And I said, okay, why? Because that's diverse. Like I did it. I did the diversity thing. Like we got him. Haha, made him. Got diversity. And I was like, did we read it at all? Or were we looking for something because we thought that's what was expected of us? We thought, okay, if I put this person in, or I hire this person, or I ensure that this particular person is present, that I have already met my quota of diversity. That's what happens a lot of times. And the reason why we do that is, again, it brings back to the socialization. how we've been socialized to believe, how we've been socialized to move in the world, how our workspaces have been socialized from the top down. There is a look to C-suite. We know what C-suite is supposed to look like. Before we even start talking about what is right, what is wrong, what is indifferent, what is diverse, what is inclusive, we know what it's supposed to look like. And when we don't see it, that's when we get shocked. It's a lot of women in here. Look at that. Okay, with the natural hair. All right, look at y'all. You already, because you had an expectation of what it was supposed to be. And unfortunately, sometimes when the expectation is different, we just hop on that and be like, look, they did it. And we give them a pass because they did it, without also going intentionally and saying, all right, you got different types of people, but whose voices are being heard? Who is being taken in consideration when we're doing this? But again, it all goes back to our socialization, what we know. And that's why it's so hard for us to break away from certain biases, because we know. I have been in school long enough to know what I know. So when somebody come and tell me something different, I'm kind of be like, I don't think that's right. I just don't think that that's how you do it. Well, have you heard about this? Have you heard about theory? Because I know, right? And it's reinforced. We reinforce it in our institutions. We reinforce it in our friend groups. I always laugh with my partner and say, everybody in my house believe the same thing. That's why they live in my house. The only time I have to think outside of what I would normally do is when I have to go outside and interact with people who are different from me. But I normally surround myself with everybody who's exactly like me. It's easier. I think all the time. I don't want to have to think when I'm with my friends. Right? So again, these socializations, they get us comfortable in making the same decisions over and over again. So I like to always bring that as our premise, because before we can really start building a business case, we have to understand who we're about to talk to about this. We have to have a better understanding of ourselves, because at least when we know something about ourselves, we can realize and we can gain perspective when we step in it. And it's easier for us to have the confidence to be able to call somebody in when you can call yourself out. If you're afraid to call yourself out, it's really hard for you to call other people in. So from that, I want us to think through creating a business case for diversity. Let's go to the bottom line. Let's go where as it was said in 2021, I am going where the money resides. Where does the money reside? Buying power. As of 2016, United States-based Latino, Latina, and Latinx buying power was larger than the gross domestic product of Mexico. Black African-American buying power is at $1.5 trillion. The combined buying power of Black African-American, Asian American, this is not taking into account Pacific Islanders. This is not taking into account Native Hawaiians. But Asian Americans and Native Americans together brought in 2.2 trillion. That was in 2016. Right now, the buying power of US Latino, Latina, and Latinx spending, not only is it larger than the GDP of Mexico, but it's bigger than some of the economies of 14 countries in the world. Right now, Black and African American buying power comprises 8.8% of our nation's buying. So that's saying that marginalized identities are spending money. We have buying power. If you take LGBTQ communities in 2019 around the world, so this is globally, they as a community brought in $3.7 trillion. That is why when you go to Target, there is a section for us now. Oh, Pride Month. What is all this about Pride Month? We are so inclusive. No, we have a lot of money. We have a lot of money. So before we even say it's the right thing to do, it's in our best interest and our bottom line to be able to work with different types of people, because guess what? Your labor force is representative of that group. Millennials was brought into the space about millennials, age groups and things like that. Millennials, these are ages 24 to 40, are one of the most racially and ethnically diverse group in our workforce. And guess what? 76% of them want a culture that is actually integrated, that is culturally relevant. What happened that's different from this generation than our baby boomers? Globalization. I have friends all over the world now. I get perspectives that I would never have had before. I have a student who's just coming in to college, and she says, was very proud of the fact I went to one of the most diverse high schools in New York. Don't tell me what we can't do when we work together. I know. In her interview and coming into our college, because we're coming in, we have all these stats for the College of Business, and we're #1 in Colorado, and we have all these great stats that we're bringing to her. She said, what's your diversity look like? I was in there like, oh, she got us. Because that was her. I make my decisions based on where I can grow. I was like, she 18. I ain't figured that out until I was 30. I was just taking jobs. I was just being in spaces. She's like, I'm not even coming to your school if it's not going to grow me. If I'm not going to learn how to work with different types of people, it doesn't matter. We had to pull out our strategic plan. Wait a minute. We doing stuff. Because that is the group of people that we have coming in. If you are an executive, if you are on a board of directors, if you are a manager and you do not know that by 2030, 75% of your labor force will be millennials and Gen Z, so that's 20 to 49-year-olds, you're already behind. You got 9 years to get your infrastructure up, to be able to not only cater to, but take care of this growing population. These are the folks who want to talk about politics in the workplace. These are the folks who want to talk about pronouns. These are the folks who care about microaggressions. These are the ones that will sue you and not think twice. Not only are they a group that got money, but they got positional power. So if we don't understand our actual workforce, then we cannot plan for them. We cannot plan to actually add them into our communities, because guess what? They don't care if they don't fit. They have blue hair. They don't care that they don't fit. They will tattoo everything. They don't care if they don't fit. They actually don't mind hanging out with each other and just living together, and that's their life. They don't care if they don't fit. So we can't even say we're looking for the best fit. You ain't gonna find it. We're not. If we're not looking for folks who will actually be adding to us, then we're behind. And as someone who is in leadership, I need you to be thinking about that. I need you to be thinking about how, if I have a person come in and they are interviewing for my space and they don't look like anything that I have ever worked with before, how am I ensuring? And I love someone threw into this space. We still have generational folks. People aren't retiring. So we still got to make sure that that group is completely inclusive. Even though 75% of our new workforce are going to be between this of 20 and 49, 25% is going to be over 55. 55 and over, and they're still going to be working. So we're going to have to also get them into what our entire company is. And we're going to have to meet them where they are. My mom is 63 years old. She's still working every day. I have asked her to stop. Please stop. You're causing problems at this point. And she's like, no, I'm gonna work until I just can't work no more. I enjoy working. I've worked since I was 11 years old, and I enjoy it. I don't want to stop working. So I'm like, Mom, you got a couple dollars between us. You don't have to work. I work. That's what we do. I want to be able to take care of myself. That is a part of her own independence as a person, her own autonomy. And so what do we have to do? We have to make sure my mom is also up to date. Have you taken a new computer class? Do you know how to do when you have your little suite? Do you know what that means? And so she has to go through that, but also in a way that I'm also respecting the sacredness of who she is. That all has to play in this as well. If we are being inclusive to this new population who is asking for cultural relevance and who they are, we cannot neglect people who have been doing this work before some of us were even born. We have to remember that can actually live in tandem. Because sometimes we forget that. We forget about age. We forget about the nuances that come with just being a part of a different generation. So there are things that we're going to have to probably follow up with, and we have to make sure that we understand that. That's another reason why our C-suite has to be inclusive. Because I need someone who's been here for a while, and I need someone who is new and fresh with ideas to also be here. And I need their expertise to be honored equally. Same thing with our boards. One of the greatest things I can say that I have been able to do in my career is I now sit on the board of directors for XOTV Global, which is a social media platform. And I'm the first Black, queer, non-binary, transgender person. And I can't tell you how many times I have to come in and say, you know, you can't say that. You know, you can't do that. You know that's actually going to cause some more issues. I know that this person may have made some content that is absolutely racist, but you're going to have to audit everybody's content. So like even having those different perspectives of my own lived experience in there changes the way that we do things. I said the same thing with minority growth. By 2039, working age population become more than 50% are going to be identified as minorities. By 2050, over 55%. By 2050, 62% of the nation's children will be considered minorities, up from 44% today. Our world is changing, it's changing fast. And guess what? That's actually a good thing. It's actually a good thing. I know a lot of folks are like, oh, I wish things were the way they were. I don't know about you, but I didn't really like telephone booths. That just wasn't my thing. I'm glad that we have cell phones. That's a thing. I'm glad that I can actually call people while they're moving. They don't have to be stationary in their homes. I remember when you used to have to get a letter sent home with you when you got in trouble from school. Then they start leaving it on the voicemail. What kind of space age stuff is this? How dare you leave a message that my mother could get at any point in the day? I can conveniently lose this letter. Now you can actually do a whole chat with your kid's teacher while they're doing whatever they're doing in class. Now your parent could be like, I actually saw you do it. Like I could see you because we could see into the classroom. And you're just like, wow, we're in a space age now. But I say that because a lot of times when we think about this, we think about it as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. This is what we've actually been working towards. We've been working toward transformational change. So as we think about all these changes that are happening, different types of people being in our space, we think about performance. Okay, Patrice, what does it mean what does diversity pay? So I've already told you diversity pays that we know of in the fact that your workforce is going to be so diverse. So if that means that your workforce is diverse, you also recognize that your buying power of folks who 10, 20 years ago could not create the buying power that they have now, they are. We know that this new workforce, as well as the growing marginalized identities, are specifically looking for people who know how to take care of them. So it behooves us to have a space that we actually are able to meet their needs. By 2023, that's in 2 years, customer experience will become the top priority for companies. It will overtake both the product and the price. I will tell you today, I have walked out of stores because people have ignored me. Not believing that I should be in this space, I've walked out. I have not worked with companies because they didn't see me as a human. I could also say I've spent more money than I'm supposed to spend with people because they treated me like I was supposed to be there. Brand loyalty, that's a real thing. Social media is big. It will catch you if you don't know what you're doing. But the biggest part is understanding that when you have a team that is actually diverse, and this is not at the bottom up, this is from the top down. You understand that teams that are gender, age, ethnically diverse make better decisions 87% of the time. We do better when we're more inclusive. We understand people when we're more inclusive. Performance. Racial and ethnic diversity has a stronger impact on financial performance in the United States than gender diversity. We have spent a lot of time and we've spent a lot of money ensuring that only one form of diversity is taken care of, and that's usually gender. But we also see that there is a ceiling to where that expertise lies. Our executives, our boards are not as diverse as the rest of our companies are being. So if the top ain't doing it, it can't be sustainable at the lowest part of the organization. It's not sustainable. And this is going just beyond cisgender white men. That's for any organization. One of the things I like for folks to do is walk away and looking at this graph. Diversity is in the center. Brand reputation is impacted, but brand reputation is impacted by community engagement. When you engage with a community, your brand goes up. When you disengage with a community, your brand goes down with that community. Innovation. You cannot create diverse types of products if you do not have an understanding of community involvement and community engagement. You cannot design to meet the needs of people if you do not understand the community that you're working with. Employee engagement. Your employees are your brand. If they don't like their job, the product suffers, the reputation suffers, the community suffers. So as leaders, we have to have an understanding of how our employees are engaging and what their needs are. We also need to have positional leadership and authority. You cannot come into my community asking my community of what it needs, and I don't see nobody that look like me who's in positions of power. You don't want me, you want my money. And it's very easy for me to figure that out. You don't want to actually help our community help itself. Financial performance. If you want to see the numbers grow, start changing those other things. Because we know it's attached. We have all the data that tells us it's all attached to each other. And this is taking from targeting to centering. Even when we are working with vulnerable communities, do not target them in how you are approaching your programmatic initiatives. Center them. The difference between centering and targeting is when I target you, I know I got to get something out of y'all. You already create dissonance between yourself and that community because I got to get something from you. When you center them, they're giving you something. They're the ones that are leading by example. So think through that as you think about how diversity is playing from a top-down approach as well as from a bottom-up. Because what I have noticed is that the folks that that really struggle with this work are middle managers, because they don't know what the top is doing and they really don't understand what the bottom is doing either. They're just kind of there enforcing without any understanding. And therefore, there's a disconnect completely throughout the organization as it relates to diversity, because they don't really know what they're supposed to be doing with it. And when I use the term bottom, I'm using from a lower going up. Okay? Remember that inclusion is not exclusive. That happens with the best of our intentions. When we're trying to create a brew at New Belgium, I am looking to ensure that I'm working with different markets, but I cannot say that I don't want no white dudes in it. They still have to be a part of that. In making sure that I'm being inclusive, I have to also make sure that everybody is there. There should be no one that is in the organization saying, you're not talking to me. You don't care about my needs. Because again, it goes back to our bias. What is diversity? Does it look a certain way? Is it only 5 different salient identities? Or is it an amalgamation of so many different things? Remember, when we're looking at inclusive things, wherever you are in the structure of your organization, I want to know, what is your goal? What you're trying to accomplish? Write it down and make it plain. Not that we want to give exceptional service to exceptional communities. I've read that so many times. Because I'm like, what does that mean? Like, just what is the goal? What are you trying to do? Culture. How are you communicating the company culture? Is it just a family? Is it folks who could actually grow and mature in the organization? What is your culture? Is your culture, you don't say nothing to the top echelon of the company? Know your place. Keep your head down. Work hard. What is your culture? Because however your culture translates, that's going to translate to your employee engagement. It's also going to translate to your community members. They're going to know, I wish we could work with them, but we know we're not going to get too far because they can't speak up for us. Language. How does your written and unwritten cultural language translate to others? How does it actually translate to folks? Have you done a survey? Have you done a pulse of your organization? Have you done an equity audit? Have you figured out where are gaps? Have you looked at what you're saying versus what you're doing? Have you tried to ensure that the community to which you reside, that there is actually language for them to have to know what is going on without having to ask somebody? Do you know the ages of your community members? One of the things that we are doing with New Belgium, great thing that we just had come up the other day, we're talking about, oh, we want to make sure that we are making available the language. We want the language to be there. So we're going to have everything translated into Spanish so that we can have all that there for our customers. And one of our coworkers, who's a part of our Latin affinity group, said, well, what language are you writing it in? Because if they're over a certain age, they speak this language. If you do it in another, who are you talking to? And literally we were at the table like, because we got to write it in Spanish because we want to make sure that folks have it's accessible. And they were very much like, it's not accessible if you don't know who you're talking to. So like literally everything on the whiteboard had to come off. Okay, let's start over. We got to do this again. Because we came in there with best intentions. We want folks to have access, but we never took into account who we're providing access for. So that matters. And barriers, there will be barriers. Figure out what they are so you can plan. Plan accordingly. From here, I want to talk to that top-down strategy for my executives who are in the space, for my directors, for folks who are really over how to push these things forward. DEI is not an HR program or initiative. Take it out of there. They should be stakeholders, they should be collaborators, but they should not be the only people talking about this work. Cultural competence. We have to get that from the top down. And cultural competence is the ability to understand, appreciate, and interact with people with cultures or belief systems that are different from your own. That should be something that everyone in the C-suite, every manager already knows moving forward. Guess what? Take your own advice. Because you would advise folks that, hey, you got to get to know these things. You got to know how these things work. Take your own advice in that. Executives shouldn't be consumed with training and facilitation only. You cannot train your way out of bad behavior. You cannot train away bad attitudes. You should be thinking about innovative and creative ways to tie DEI into your business strategy. How is this tied into the business strategy? What is the resource that will continue to make sure that this goes past year one? How are you truly integrating this? Because if it was accounting, you make sure that you had a consultant for accounting. You would make sure that we understood where our money was going, if that was the case. Operations, we would make sure we knew how those things work. Why are we doing that any less with our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies? Why is that just a second thought? And again, that has to be from the top down. Because when top is saying yes, then my manager's performance has to reflect that. Because it's great to say, hey, we have all these diversity programs, but if nobody ever has it, is responsible for making sure they're actually instituted, they're implemented, and there's no way to measure that, there's no benchmark in that, you will not actually get what you think you will get out of this. So make sure you're taking that into account. And lastly, I'm gonna use the 4 C's. I think the last time I gave you the 4 E's. Now we're on C. I don't know how this alphabet thing is gonna work with me, but this is where I'm at today. We're 4 C's. Inclusion is not a matter of political correctness. It is the key to growth. I want you to look at it from a growth mindset and not so I don't get sued. I don't want you to get it because I want to appear to be a certain type of way when I'm interacting with people. I want you to do it because you know that this will grow the organization and the community at large. That's why you're doing it. That's why this is important. Your 4 C's: competence, build your knowledge base. You had an opportunity to come here to start thinking about this out loud. Continue doing this good work. Compassion, empathize and act. I don't need you just to feel bad about it. As a matter of fact, if you feel too bad about it, you won't move. You'll be overwhelmed with the feeling of how bad and how big it is. So I need you to understand that this is a big thing that we got to go through together, but I need you to move too. Commitment, create trust and stand by your word. If you don't have your word as an organization, you don't have anything. And when your word fails, acknowledge it. Last but not least, I want you to construct. uplift and build up others while creating new pathways. I don't like to use best practices because if it was the best practice, it would already worked. So I look at proven practices, what has worked in the past that we can implement to our organization. And I also look at promise. What can we do that is so out of the box that has never been done? Let's do it. Because guess what? This job ain't getting no easier. So we need innovation, we need creativity, and we need folks to take risk. I'm so very grateful to be able to have a conversation with you all today because this is not something that we've done in this way before. So we're already thinking innovatively and creatively about how do we empower all of our community members to continue doing this good work. This is a way to do that. With that being said, and knowing that I am probably at time, I could probably only have enough for maybe one question, but what I will do is I will put my email in the chat. Please reach out to me. I am a part of this community as well. I want us to get to a space where we can continue to do this good work and ensure that everyone, when they come into our space in Fort Collins, Colorado, they don't have to say, am I the only one? They should be able to see themselves represented. And if they don't see themselves represented in physical, they see it in how you embrace who they are. When you walk into a space, they should be able to say, I'm the only one here, but you wouldn't know that. You would not know that. That not only builds brand loyalty, but that will reinforce and re-strengthen how folks view you and what you're continuing to do. Leadership is transformative. We're not trying to change the world, but we are trying to transform it. Thank you so much for the space.
Thank you, Patrice. Applause in the weird Zoom world here. Thanks to all of you. We know it's 2 o'clock. Your time is precious, and this was so incredible. We're committed to ongoing learning in this space, as I mentioned, and invite all of you to share your feedback with me, with us, with our team. We see a lot of opportunity through our shared resources here. Seeing so many of you as part of this today just continues to fortify that commitment for us. I'll close with a quote from someone I also respect and saw referenced on your slides, Dr. Brene Brown, of "We are here to get it right and not to be right." And that spirit of ongoing learning and what we're doing as a community, us included, I think will be transformative. So thanks, Patrice, for being our guide and content expert today, and hope all of you have a fantastic weekend. And it looks like some contact information in the chat, so make sure you check that out and stay in touch. We want this to be something we all, throw ideas in about what are you struggling with, what are things you want to learn more. We'll stay in contact with Patrice and with all of you. Awesome. Thanks, JR, for being our Zoom host, and thank you, Allie, with the Community Language Cooperative for providing language justice today.
Absolutely. Thank you all.